You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk. Ooh, how are you today? Beautiful day here in East Greenbush, New York. Sunshiny, going to be 70-something the next 3 days. Maybe we're getting into some better weather. We certainly hope so. Listen, today we're going to be talking about the 2021/2020, I guess, NBA and college basketball Hall of Fame inductions, which my banner does not say. Let me fix my banner, guys. Oh my gosh. How funny is that? Oh gosh. Bear with me. Unbelievable. How do you leave Hall of Fame up? All right. So how are you guys doing today, by the way? Anybody got anything to add while I'm doing this? Great live TV, Keith. Well done. Who's here? Good morning, Carlos. Good morning, Dave Gayette. Spurs almost came back. Well, we're not going to talk about the NBA. We can talk about the NBA on the Mac and Jack show at 9 o'clock, Carlos. Today we're going to cover the NBA College Basketball Hall of Fame inductions. Kobe Bryant, all you Laker fans, Kevin Garnett, Timberwolves and Celtics fans, Tim Duncan, great player for the Spurs, Rudy Tomjanovich, great player, which people forget, and also a great coach with Houston. Eddie Sutton coached everywhere, most notably Arkansas and Oklahoma State in college. We'll talk about him. Tamika Cummings, star player at University of Tennessee, and then with Indiana and WNBA. Kim Mulkey, great coach at both Baylor and LSU now. Barbara Stevens, who had a long career at Division II Bentley, and Patrick Bauman, huge contributor to international basketball. Good morning, you, Carlos, again. Oh, guys, what are we going to start? Let me first thank Denny McLean for our guest last week, and we had a great interview with Denny. If you haven't caught it, I finally got it up on the Northeast Streaming Sports page, which, by the way, guys, I'll make a quick announcement before we move on. The TGI Sports Talk page is back. Thank you, Facebook. An explanation would still be in line. So before we move on any further, thank you to the gods at Facebook. So, guys, we're going to talk, as I said, NBA, WNBA, college basketball today. Just do a little preview of the inductions. We'll talk a little about each player/coach that will be being inducted. We'll also be talking about it later. We'll have a live show on Northeast Streaming Sports. Myself, Mac and Jack from the Mac and Jack Sports Show will be there, but I think Mac will only be there a short time. We're going to cover the press conference this afternoon live. Hope to get a few questions. And so if you have some questions for some of the players, you can feel free to add them. And as we go through this today, we'll get to Timmy. We'll probably do him up third here, Carlos, but we'll talk about that. Any comments you have, we'll certainly jump into them. Obviously, some of these players I'm going to talk about a little bit more than some others based on my knowledge of them. But I did a little research so that we know a little bit about all of these inductees because they're all worthy of having a little attention paid to them, especially some of the lesser known inductees. So with that said, let's jump in live here. We'll go, we're going to go an hour as we normally would. I don't have a guest. We'll be doing this between myself and the audience. And, if we go shorter than an hour, we go shorter than an hour. So we'll jump right in at the top. Kobe Bryant, Lakers. Kobe Bryant, what can you say? Kobe Bryant is one of the greats of the team, of the game. the Black Mamba, as they like to call him, or he liked to call himself, unsure about where the moniker actually came from. Maybe we'll find out later. Today he'll be inducted by Michael Jordan, by the way. Should pull that up somewhere. Who else can introduce Kobe Bryant but Michael Jordan? Drafted straight out of high school, number 13 by the Lakers. Lots of machinations behind the scenes to actually get him to the Lakers. There were trades. Didn't get off to a tremendous start in his rookie season. Only played about 15 minutes a game. But remember, he was still a 17, 18-year-old kid. At the time, he was the youngest player to play in the NBA, I believe. He was the son of Joe Bryant, Jellybean Bryant, from who played with the Philadelphia 76ers. I do think they had a strained relationship a lot through their lives, which is a shame. But, what a great player. 20 years with the Lakers, 5 championships. MVP in 2008, 18-time All-Star, 11 times All-NBA, 2-time scoring champion. That's some tremendous individual games. The fact that Kobe stayed with the Lakers is respectable. New York and other teams were ready to pay him. Yes, Kobe had plenty of chances to go and make, and not that Kobe hurt for money or the Lakers didn't pay him handsomely through his career. But Kobe, yes. Good morning to Bob Engel, my dad. Thanks for coming in, Dad. I'm happy to be back on Northeast Streaming Sports Talk. We are streaming live to Northeast Streaming Sports, and I didn't mention it. I'll mention it at the back end, I guess, where we're streaming to. I was so excited to be back on my page, I forgot to mention anybody else. The Kobe was also, back to Kobe Bryant, also a gold medal winner at the 2008 and 2012 Olympics. And again, yes, I'll go back to Carlos' statement. The fact that he stayed with LA in this time is amazing. You see guys like LeBron, and we're going to talk about a couple of guys today in this category. Guys like LeBron, all the big stars today, they move around. Whether it's to get more money, whether it's to have a chance to win. And there's a lot of reasons that they move. And most of them are understandable. Now, Kobe, unfortunately, is going to be inducted posthumously as he died in a tragic helicopter accident with his young daughter, Gianna, last January 2020. Very sad story. But Kobe had a great career, a great life, and his life goes on. His legacy goes on. Carlos says that he played on some horrible teams, carried the Lakers to at least 2 championships. Don't disagree, but don't forget, he also played with Shaq for the three-peat. They had an interesting relationship, Shaq and Kobe, obviously. It was a love-hate kind of thing. They did need each other at that time. For the Lakers to get that three-peat, I do not think they would have got it with one of them at any point in time, to be honest with you. And they played for a great coach in Phil Jackson, who Kobe also clashed with sometimes. Kobe was a very, 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 type A personality, and he just carried, as Carlos said, he carried some teams. Maybe he shot the ball too much at different times, but I think Kobe evolved through his career and became a very, very, very a great all-round basketball player. He would get other people involved. But when it was time to take over a game, much like Michael Jordan, Kobe did it. So what can you say? I mean, what else is there to say? Yes, again, I don't want to sugarcoat Kobe's career. He did have some off-the-court instance. Well, at least one very highly publicized one. Which, again, when you're high visibility like these athletes are, you got to be very careful the situations you put yourself in, because he put himself and his career at jeopardy. He put his family at jeopardy, but he did evolve. Good point. And Carlos talks about the fact that he evolved, and many players today Not many players today evolve. It's a very good point. Kobe did evolve as a person, I think, too. As importantly as evolving as a player, I think Kobe, again, looking at it from the outside, we don't ever know what's going on in somebody else's home, but I think he evolved personally as well as professionally, which is impressive to me. Again, he went through something that could have destroyed a lot of careers. I'm sure a lesser player, it would have destroyed their career. But somehow he saved his career, he saved his marriage, he saved his family. And I'm sure that some of these allegations were probably not true. The problem is, again, he was still a young man at the time, and he put himself in a situation where those things could be, what's the word I'm looking for? Capitalized on. So anyway, Kobe Bryant, we'll talk about number one as our first comment. We can go back if we have to later on, but I'm going to keep going through the list because there's a lot of guys to talk about and a lot to talk about, for at least 10, 15 minutes a piece. So we don't want to spend too much time on one person, and we'll backtrack if we have to. And I want to be able to spend some time on all of these candidates. We know a lot about Kobe Bryant. Obviously, there's a lot to say. He's certainly a well-deserving candidate. So that's our number one candidate today. G-Man Sneaky. The G-Man is here today. Good to see Sneaky. I won't call you Squeaky today. I do an NFC East show on Wednesday nights with Sneaky and the Philly sports guy and True Blue. I am the Washington contributor, by the way, believe it or not. So they're all super fans. I'm just the contributor for the Washington Redskins. We're going to move on to our next inductee, Kevin Garnett, Minnesota Timberwolves, Boston Celtics, New York Nets. Interestingly enough, two players, which is a rarity. Well, maybe it won't be a rarity. Yeah, I guess it is a rarity and probably always will be because of the rules in the NBA. Well, there'll be one more for sure, we know. Did not play any college basketball. Came directly to the NBA from high school. Sorry, guys, a little congested this morning. Came directly to the NBA from high school, drafted by the Timberwolves, and I think the 5th overall pick in the draft. Trying to get to the comments here, sorry. Good morning to Brett Cloutier, talking about Kevin Garnett now. Sneaky G, the football team. Did I say the Redskins again? Oh my gosh. I'm going to get banned again. Kevin Garnett, again, so sad he did play in Minnesota, right? But he did, by the way, turn a Moore-Brown franchise. Help turn a Moore-Brown franchise. Flip Saunders was his coach and helped as well. But that team had previously been just woeful. Never in the playoffs. Usually with the worst record in basketball. And he took them to the playoffs, I want to say 8 straight times. Now, they didn't do much once they got there. They just didn't have the talent. But he helped turn around a franchise that was actually going absolutely nowhere. As Carlos mentions here, the Timberwolves were always 3 players short. I agree. It was Kevin Garnett and, Sam Mitchell, I remember. But he did not have a lot of great players to play with for sure. Well, they stink now, Brett, for sure. But the last time they were any good and made the playoffs, Carlos's favorite coach was coaching them. We won't get into that. We can do that at 9 o'clock on the Mac and Jack show if you like, Carlos. But today we're going to concentrate on the Hall of Fame inductee. So again, 21 NBA seasons for Kevin Garnett. Amazing. He played for the Timberwolves from 95 to 2007. Went to the Celtics in 2007. They got a chance to win. They won the World Championship, the NBA Championship in 2008. Great team. Paul Pierce, Rajon Rondo, Ray. Oh gosh, why is the shooting guard escaping me? Came from the Supersonics. Somebody will help me out. So, again, great career with the Celtics. He gets to the Nets, and to be honest with you, probably an ill-advised Tibbs system. I'm not going there right now. I'm not going right there now. Wally and Stephen Marbury, yeah. I don't know that I'm not sure that Garnett played with Marbury, though. Ray Allen, thank you. I was going to say Ray Allen's sneaky, but it was escaping me. So anyway, 15-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, Defensive Player 2008. Just a great, great player. Again, Olympic gold medal winner in 2000. And again, it's funny, other than the championships, very similar career trajectory to Kobe Bryant. Other than, also they began to win right away, which is really funny. The Lakers didn't start winning immediately, I don't think, when Kobe arrived, and not because of Kobe for sure. He had to grow. Kevin Garnett was thrown right into it and did a great, great job doing that. So again, a great player and maybe even a somewhat underrated player. There are probably people out there that think he was overrated, because it's the funny thing about overrated and underrated, those terms, there's always somebody on both sides of those comments. So just a great job by Kevin Garnett. And don't forget, actually, very good point, Brett. Kevin Garnett appears in Hidden Gems. Just a great movie, by the way, guys, about the in New York City and the jewelry industry and gambling and drugs, and oh my gosh, it's really a dark movie. Adam Sandler is awesome in it. Not something you usually see Adam Sandler in, but Kevin Garnett has a guest starring role in that movie, and his championship ring is also important to it. Pierce, Allen, Rondo, Celtics were killing the East. They had great teams, right? I always thought they would win a couple more championships while that team was together. They weren't none of them were young guys. Rondo was the youngest guy, obviously, of that group. They just couldn't get over the hump and beat the Lakers that second time, unfortunately. And KG evolved too. I'll give you that's very true, Carlos. KG's game did evolve, and he became a better shooter later on. Very good point. Excellent point. Game was mostly interior before that, so excellent job. We can always talk a little bit more about Kevin if we need to, but we're going to move on for the moment to our next inductee that we're going to talk about. It will be the Big Fundamental, one of the great nicknames in sports history, Tim Duncan, outstanding player at Wake Forest. Now, in contrast to our first two inductees, 4-year starter at Wake Forest, which you don't see ever anymore. Talking about things that don't happen anymore, Carlos. We don't see guys stay 4 years in college, much less 2 years or 3 years. Tim Duncan did, and Tim Duncan, it probably behooved him to do so because he got better and better every year. And by the way, he came from St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, and he wasn't really much of a basketball player. He wanted to be a swimmer, an Olympic swimmer, and was training to do so, even at 6'8", probably in high school. Ended up being 7 foot tall. But I think a hurricane destroyed if I remember right, the story, a hurricane destroyed the gymnasium that they trained in, and he could no longer train to swim, and he turned his attentions to basketball. He was a natural, didn't really need 4 years of college. I don't know if I agree. I'll be honest with you, Carlos, I think all these guys benefit from 4 years of college. When he came out, he was a man, and he was ready to compete with the big, especially at that position, which, again, that position barely exists anymore. But this guy could do everything. And he had this, he played the game differently. He plays a game, to me, that doesn't even get played anymore. he had this array of low post moves. He had a deadly mid-range jumper. Who takes a mid-range jumper anymore? Hardly anybody. The game is dunks and three-pointers. The Knicks do a bit. And he was also a great, great defensive player, by the way. And that mid-range jumper was a bank shot almost all the time. He used the backboard. Nobody uses the backboard anymore. That's vague. Not all player. Again, I don't know. Again, Carlos, I don't think that's vague. I think it's a very specific comment. What players aren't going to get better? There aren't that many players that come into the NBA with a year in college and dominate. Not many. Or out of high school. We talked about two guys who came from high school. If you don't think that Kevin Garnett might have been different. Kobe certainly could have used some seasoning in college before he came to the NBA. And look at the guys that come out now. There are more guys that don't make it than do. In every sport. But when you're coming out, especially, I guess, again, as I said, I did qualify it a little bit, especially big guys at that time. The game was played differently when Kevin Duncan came into the league, obviously. Well, mid-conference teams, they're the teams that play 4 years, the kids that play 4 years. Again, all of those kids pretty much play 4 years at the WAC and the OVC and the MAC. So let's not get off topic. That's a good topic for another show, though, Carlos. We'll dive into that. Don't let me forget. We'll have a little debate show. I'm going to have to get Carlos on the show one day. On Sunday. We'll do a little debate on some of his favorite topics. I love talking to Carlos. Anyway, back to Tim Duncan. The Big Fundamental. Isn't that a great nickname, by the way? Love it. 4-year starter at Wake Forest, as I said. First overall pick for San Antonio in 1997, I believe. 5-time champion again, matching Kobe Bryant. 15-time All-Star, 10-time All-NBA, 2-time MVP. He was a Rookie of the Year. Now, one of the only things that tarnished him a little bit, if so, they did not win a gold medal in the Olympics, unlike all of these other guys. They won a disappointing bronze in 2004. Teamed up at San Antonio early in his career with the great David Robinson to have the Twin Towers. Carlos, I have to agree with you on this comment. Those San Antonio teams are some of the best teams, in my mind, in NBA history. So well schooled in the fundamentals. Duncan was an unreal player, but he was exciting as a piece of dry toast. Doesn't matter how exciting he is. Doesn't matter. How does excitement win games? Doesn't. Tim Duncan, I would argue, many of those years, judging, of course, by also his many accolades, was the best player in the NBA. Probably MVP more than 2 times, or should have been. People are all about the Lakers, and let's go back to that. Yes, we were talking about the Spurs being underrated. Popovich being a great coach. I think early on, I don't remember the season, but it might have been 98. Oh, the strike season. Yeah, 98, 99, I think it was. The Spurs were off to a bad start. They were going to fire the coach. Popovich, one of the great coaches of all time, nearly didn't get out of, early in his career because of a slow start during the strike season. Duncan and Robinson intervened on his behalf. The team turned things around. And they were a great, great force for many years after that. Sean Elliott, another great player, lost in his shuffle. Had some injury issues, but a great player. Great trio, Robinson, Elliott, and Duncan. Sure, don't forget Tony Parker later. And who's the foreign guy that played with him as well. The Spurs, the great thing about the Spurs is they continued to evolve. We've used the word evolve a lot today. to evolve as a team and adapt and play the game differently and move different people in and out. Tony Parker wasn't part of that first wave of championships, but he came along and won a couple later on. Can't think of the foreign guy that played. I'm sure Carlos will get it for me. But just a tremendous player, Tim Duncan. So very interestingly enough, the first three guys that we've talked about, three very different players. And two of them came into the league without any experience in college, right out of high school. One had plenty of experience, but they all had a very, very strong careers. Two of them were played for more winners, but it's not on Kevin Garnett that he doesn't have 5 world championships. As we talked about, he played in Vinny Del Negro is not the guy I'm thinking of, but Manu Ginobili, I think, is who I'm thinking of. But Vinny Del Negro was a very key part of those teams, some of those teams as well. Ginobili, there you go. Thank you, Brett. Manu Ginobili, great player, man. There were some fun teams to watch. If you wanted to watch really good basketball, those San Antonio Spurs were fun to watch. I do know that David Robinson, by the way, is presenting Tim Duncan. Who's presenting Kevin Garnett? I do not remember, unfortunately, who's presenting Kevin Garnett, so I apologize. So anyway, these first three guys, tremendous players, but different in many, many, many ways. Let's move on to our next selection, or next inductee. Oh, no. There he is. Rudy T. Houston Rockets, did coach the Lakers. You know what people forget about? Rudy Tomjanovich won 2 championships as a coach of the Houston Rockets. Rudy Tomjanovich was a really, really, really good player for the Rockets. Was an All-American at Michigan. Drafted number 2 by the San Diego Rockets. Before they moved to Houston. They moved to Houston the next year. He was also drafted by the Utah Stars of the ABA. And he was a very, very solid player. He'd average 20 points a game, high single digits in rebounds. Very, very good fundamental player, similar to what we talk about with Tim Duncan. Rudy T, the man that ownership finally got him a player. Yeah, well, Rudy T journey, by the way, let's talk a little bit still as a player. He's a 5-time All-Star. I'm sorry, 3-time All-Star. Was again a very, very good player, and part of one of the worst incidents in NBA history, and a very sad incident. The Lakers were playing the Rockets. The year's escaping me. I want to say late 70s anyway. And a fight broke out. And Rudy wasn't really part of the scrum. He was heading towards it. And Kermit Washington, a really good guy, a good player, just had a moment that kind of changes people's lives. He saw the corner of his eye, Rudy rushing towards the scrum, and he just turned and punched him in the face and almost killed Rudy. Broke his face into a million pieces. He ended up having spinal fluid leaking because of the injuries. And if you haven't read The Punch, One Night, Two Lives, and the fight that changed the NBA forever by John Feinstein, it's a great book. It's all about this moment in NBA history. And if you don't know John Feinstein's work, then I really recommend you start reading his stuff on all sports. He's a great writer. This is one of his best work, I think. So changed Rudy. Rudy did come back from this and still made an all-star team, but I don't think he was really the same player after the punch. and it did probably shorten his career a bit. But again, a very good career as a player. He becomes an assistant. Now he retires. I believe he becomes a scout first, and then he becomes an assistant under Bill Fitch and then Don Chaney. And when Don Chaney resigned, they gave the interim head coaching job to Rudy. Finished out that year, and he had a winning record that year. The Rockets didn't make the playoffs, but then he became the full-time coach. And all he did was win 503 games and 2 championships. Now, Rudy was Rudy wasn't a big X and O guy, but Rudy's a great coach in his own way. And he had one of the best players in NBA history, obviously, in Akeem Olajuwon, which kind of helps. And a bunch of role players to go with him. Because remember, don't start telling me they had Drexler and they had Barkley. Those guys didn't, and Pippen. Those guys didn't come till later. They won world championships with Olajuwon, Vernon Maxwell, Mario Ealy. Mario Ealy, who played here with the Patroons in Albany. Great job by Rudy Tomjanovich coaching the Houston Rockets to consecutive world championships. Otis Thorpe, another good name. Good point. Another guy I forget. Man, that guy was... We talked about Otis Thorpe with... when I was talking... I think it was during when I was doing a Big East show. Might have been... I don't know if it was Matt Bruster. It might have been with... it might have been with Chuck Everson and Sonny Spira. Not sure, but Otis Thorpe was a monster at Providence and became a really good NBA player. But, certainly not Hall of Fame material, though. Solid shooter for sure. So anyway, Rudy coaches them to consecutive championships. And then the following seasons, they still go to the conference championships, the conference semifinals. They still have really good teams, but they don't get any more final appearances or wins. I'm not sure what that means, Carlos, but that's okay. And he left after the, I want to say the 2003 season. He had bladder cancer, decided to step away. And the team had struggled for a few years, 3-4 years, I'm not sure. No playoffs, under 500. And his 33-year run with the Rockets comes to an end. But after a year or maybe 2 sitting out, the Lakers lure him out of retirement to coach, and it just wasn't a good fit. Rudy was not, Tinseltown. Rudy was, blue collar. And he didn't fit well. The Lakers were putting together a team. This Kobe's there, but they brought in Karl Malone, Gary Payton. I don't even remember the rest of the names, but it wasn't a good fit. And he resigned, I think, only 41 games into the season. Now, whether he resigned or the team kind of forced him out is up to debate, because he did get a settlement of 10. Yes, Rudy is finally getting his due, Carlos. He did get a settlement of $10 million. So usually when you resign, you don't get settlements of $10 million. So the rumors have persisted to this day that he was forced out so that eventually they could bring Phil Jackson back. Remember, Phil Jackson had coached the Lakers 2 championships, I believe, and then retired and came back, or wanted to come back, and Rudy T was in the way. So there's a lot of, again, it was not a good fit to begin with, to be honest with you. So I don't think, I really don't think it's a stand on his legacy. I think they had a winning record, and Rudy T was a great, great player, a great, great coach, and well-deserving of this honor. And as Carlos says, he's finally getting his due. He's not a name that's remembered. And Carlos is agreeing with me that he was definitely forced out with the Lakers. So Rudy T finally gets his recognition. Again, a great player and a great coach and a forgotten name in a lot of circles in the NBA, which is unfortunate, but now he gets his due, and we'll shine a little light on him here today. Next, we're going to move on to a great college coach, bit controversial in some circles, Eddie Sutton. Sutton coached with Creighton. Before that, he was with Southern Idaho in Division III, I think. It's a junior college. He went to Creighton, turned them into a winner, got them to the NCAA tournament. It was a team that was horrendous before he got there. He turned that into a good gig at Arkansas, an Arkansas team that hadn't been to the NCAAs, I think, since 1958 when he got there in 74, and turned them into a perennial NCAA participant. Had some great players at Arkansas. Sidney Moncrieff, Marvin Delph, among others. But he got them to a Final Four in 1978, I believe. Just a tremendous job there. 9 NCAA tournaments. As I said, 1 Final Four. He had a bunch of Elite Eights and Sweet 16s. He just, again, he turned Arkansas into a basketball school. It had always been a football school. A lot of the SEC schools were just, except for Kentucky, were football schools first and basketball schools second. But he turned Arkansas into a basketball school and a good coaching job too to come into afterwards. He turned that into, really parlayed that into a tremendous opportunity at Kentucky, replacing Joe B. Hall. Obviously, Kentucky had the history, unlike the other 2 schools that he took over and turned around from losers into winners. He goes to Kentucky in 85, and they have a couple of good seasons out of 3. Really, things fell apart after that, though. There was a scandal about, envelopes full of money that found their ways to players' fathers and coaches that were hired to lure coaches in. That's a good point. Sutton did set up Creighton to succeed, and they did have many good years since then. Not all good years, obviously, but it became a much better situation after Eddie Sutton, which is a situation for a lot of his schools. Again, Arkansas, as I mentioned, he turned into a really good program and a really good job for college coaches. But he runs into trouble at Kentucky, gets chased out again. Tough situation. The pressure at Kentucky to win is and again, is he the first guy to do some of these things? No. Problem is you get caught, and whether it's he or whether it's assistant coaches or whether it's boosters, it's always gray with these coaches in college, what they know, when they knew it. And it's unfortunate the way it ended for Sutton at Kentucky after only 4 years. Last year, it was really a bad year. I think they went 18-14, which before this year was really not a good season for the Kentucky Wildcats. But he goes to Oklahoma State. Again, another program that had been in just awful. And this was his alma mater, by the way. He played basketball at Oklahoma A&M is what it was called when he was a student athlete there. And they became Texas State. Boy, why do I have Texas on my brain here? They became Oklahoma State after that. And he returned to his alma mater, who had been really downtrodden for a long, long time. Again, a third school that he takes over is just awful. And he turns them into a perennial NCAA tournament team. 13 NCAA trips, 2 to the NIT, 1 Final Four. No championships for Eddie Sutton. The only thing on his resume that you can maybe hold against him. But the man had, how many wins did he have as a coach? Gosh, I want to say he had over 800 wins. Just a tremendous, tremendous coach. But again, the 2 things that really stand out for Eddie Sutton on the negative side, unfortunately for him, lack of a championship and the Kentucky situation. Where are we here? Blue chip colleges. Yeah, it becomes tough. If you haven't seen, another great movie, by the way, but if you haven't seen Blue Chips, watch that. Nick Nolte. It's probably from 20 years ago, but it holds up pretty well, and it kind of shows you what goes on behind. Brett, what are you reading my mind? It is a bit like Nick Nolte in Blue Chips, and Sutton did actually coach. Great point. How many all-star players? Big country, Bryant Reeves. The only one that comes to mind right off the top of my head. If I thought about it a little harder, I might get a few. Well, again, at Arkansas, he had some really good players. Sidney Moncrieff, who will be one of his presenters today. I didn't mention, by the way, presenting Rudy Tomjanovich will be, I believe, Calvin Murphy and Akeem Olajuwon. Eddie Sutton's presenter is Sidney Moncrieff, at least one of his presenters. Great player, Hall of Fame player himself. So he did have some players, but I agree with Carlos's statement here. He definitely was a coach who coached. You know, he wasn't, I don't know, and not to besmirch people, but I mean, there's coaches that just roll the basketball out, and he's got enough talent. There's people say that about Calipari, but actually, John Calipari, I think, is one of the presenters for Eddie Sutton as well. So again, great job by Eddie Sutton. Now we're going to jump into some of the lesser-known players here. Steve Nash. Coaches who roll the ball out. You know, again, this is our Hall of Fame show, but Carlos, you hate coaches. We got to talk about this one day. Because Steve, and again, I know I'm in the minority here. I'm not in the minority when it comes to Coach Thibodeau, and I'm only going to touch on this for a second. We'll bring it back up on the Mac and Jack show because they definitely agree with you about Steve Nash, and I think Steve Nash deserves a lot of credit for the success of that team this year. A lot of injuries, a lot of turmoil. He's done a great job. Anyway. Let's move on before we run out of time because we do have to talk about a few other inductees here today. Do not want to totally shortchange them. They will get a little bit less airtime only because we focus so much on the names, and I apologize for that for anybody who are fans of the people that I'm about to bring up because they were great coaches and great players in their own right. Tamika Cummings, super player. I think a 4-year All-American at Tennessee under the great Pat Summitt. 1998 NCAA champion, women's champions. National Player of the Year, an AP Player of the Year, and a gazillion other awards in 2008, I believe. Drafted second or third, I think, second, I believe, by the Indiana Fever. In the WNBA, 5-time WNBA All-Star, 7-time All-WNBA, 5-time Defensive Player of the Year, part of the 2015 World Championship team in the WNBA in 2015. Whoops, sorry about that. Thought I had a comment and I missed it. Tamika Cummings, again, the women don't get they get kind of a short thrift sometimes, right? But Tamika Cummings, and again, take it for what it's worth, she is the first player ever to have a quintuplet game. And I haven't looked up what it is yet. It's got to be points, rebounds, assists, steals. And it's escaping me what the fifth thing could be. So I'm wondering what it might be. And if somebody knows, let me know. But Tamika Cummings, tremendous player, also played on the USA international team, won a gold in the Olympics at Athens, and played on many other international teams, as all these guys did by the way, as professional athletes started to move into the international world of sports and being allowed to play on these teams, all these players that we talked about were part of those teams, whether it was, international world championships, FIBA tournaments, or Olympic games, Pan Am games. All of these players were contributors there. Block shots. Thank you, Brett Cloutier. Block shots. 5. So a quintuplet game. Think about that. Tremendous. Nobody's ever done it. Or she was the first player to do it. I'm not sure if it's been done since. I don't think it was. So great career for Tamika Cummings. I believe I'm not sure who's presenting her today. I almost want to say Michael Jordan. I don't think it is. Michael Jordan is presenting one other person in this. The next 3 inductees that we have are much lesser known than anybody we've talked about before, but are very deserving candidates. We'll move on to Kim Mulkey. Great player, All-American player at Louisiana Tech, longtime assistant at Louisiana Tech to their great coach there, Leon Bauman. And I think she was an assistant coach there for 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. And she got the gig at Baylor, where she coached for 20 years, won 622 games and 3 NCAA championships at Baylor. Now Baylor she turned them into a national power in women's basketball. We all know about the Tennessees and the UConns, which, as women's college basketball really started to rise and become really popular, we know about the Tennessees and the UConns, but Baylor kind of takes a back seat to those teams, and Kim Mulkey had some great, great teams at Baylor. And she won a national championship as well at Louisiana Tech as a player. She was an Olympic gold medal winner, another one in the '84 Olympics. And this past year, she moved to LSU. Interestingly enough, she leaves Baylor after 20 years and 3 national championships to take on a new challenge at LSU and only goes 28-3 and reach the Elite 8 with LSU, who, again, great school, not necessarily known for their college basketball teams. Not much more you can say. These women play. If you haven't watched women's basketball, I don't watch a lot, but when I turn it on, it's fun to watch because it's throwback. The game's played a lot more like the NBA used to be played, or the men's game used to be played 30 years ago, because you don't have all the dunks. Yes, there's women that dunk, and I'm not saying that women can't do what men do, but the game's played differently. It's played on a better fundamental level. So, great job by Kim Mulkey, and a well-deserved honor here, becoming a Hall of Fame inductee this year. Our next inductee, Barbara Stevens, which I'll be honest with you, I did not know anything about Barbara Stevens before I looked her up yesterday. Barbara Stevens has been coaching in college basketball since, let me take a look here for a second. Where is Barbara? She's been coaching college basketball since 1977, when she was coaching at Clark University. She coached at UMass for 3 years. But she really, really became a Hall of Famer and one of the great coaches in women's history at Division II Bentley, where she won 570 games against only 100 losses. Just a tremendous career there. So she's coached, she's got 900 in career wins, and she's got a couple of Division II championships. She was a great player as well. Where did she play basketball? She played her college basketball at Bridgewater State in Massachusetts. She was an All-American there. They've named the court now at Bentley in her name, the Barbara Stevens Court. Eddie Sutton, by the way, has the same honor at Oklahoma State. It's a great honor for a coach, right? I mean, it's something that college basketball has done, especially as these programs have had multiple great coaches. They may name the arena the the Dean Dome or whatever, and then maybe you'll get, it's not there yet, but you'll get Roy Williams court. Oklahoma State did this. In fact, I think the arena is the Henry Iba / something arena, and they've named the court the Eddie Sutton Court. So Barbara Stevens gets that same treatment at Bentley. Again, not household names, these guys, but it's awesome that they get the recognition that they're going to get this weekend, starting with today's press conference, which we'll be covering on Northeast Streaming Sports. So congratulations to Barbara Stevens. And the last inductee we'll talk about today is Patrick Bauman. Patrick Bauman is huge in international basketball. He's from Switzerland. He played, he coached, he refereed. He became and he also trained people to do all of these things as well. And he also became part of FIBA, which is, a huge, the organization when it comes to international basketball. Became the deputy secretary there in 1996, became the general secretary, or the secretary general, in 2002, and really, really continued the growth of international basketball. And he's had a great influence on the game across the globe. He was really big on the promotion of a 3-on-3 basketball, which has started to take on a bit of a life in international basketball competition and in some of the youth tournaments, like the Youth Olympics in 2014 used it, and I think they used it even more recently than that in one of the international youth competitions. So again, just a player that we don't know about. And he did pass away here a couple of years ago of a heart attack at one of the Youth Olympics, unfortunately. So another person going in posthumously. I think it's only, just Kobe and Patrick Bauman are the only ones going in posthumously this year. But again, great that these guys get their recognition and get the due that they are supposed to get. They are not household names like the people we talked about early on: Kobe, Kevin Garnett, Rudy T, Eddie Sutton, Tim Duncan. But Tamika Cummings, Kim Mulkey, Barbara Stevens, Patrick Bauman, they deserve this honor. They've contributed to the game of basketball as much as these other guys have, but done it in a different, quieter, less public way. And that's what Hall of Fames like this are for. People who have contributed to the growth of their game, I think. Did I miss any comments here, guys? Everybody went quiet after I got done with the big names. That's okay. So listen, I want to thank you guys. We're going to be on later, as I said. We're on Northeast Streaming Sports right now. Just a couple of quick things that I didn't mention earlier. We're live on Northeast Streaming Sports. We're live back on TGI Sports Talk page. We are live on YouTube on both of those platforms as well, TGI Sports and Northeast Streaming Sports. We're live on Zodiac today. Hello to the Zodiac viewers. We're live on, and you'll be able to catch you can catch all of these broadcasts later on, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, Zodiac TV. You can catch us on iHeartRadio and iTunes and Spotify. Well, maybe not iTunes, but Spotify and all these different, it's probably 10 different podcast outlets you can catch us on. Whatever one you're using, you can probably find us. Coming up next week, my guest, I believe, will be Barry Lyons, former catcher for the New York Mets. I want to talk to Barry. He played on the 86 Mets, didn't play a lot, but did play. And he played with those great Met teams through the late 80s. And we'll talk a little bit about, why those teams didn't win more World Series as they should have. And Barry, and what it was like to play behind a great Hall of Famer like Gary Carter. And what those Mets teams were like. It ought to be a lot of fun. Coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll have I hope Brett's still here, because I've got a hockey player coming on, which I hope Brett will be happy about. Andre Lecroix, who played in the NHL and the WHA. We're going to have on to talk a little bit about his career, the difference between hockey then and now, and maybe even dive into the NHL playoffs. Andre Lecroix. I'll send you his name. I could be saying it wrong, but he did play back in the 70s and 80s, again with the in the NHL and the WHA. So played a lot of his career in the WHA, Brett. I do know that, with the Hartford Whalers, and played with the immortal Gordie Howe. So we'll talk to Andre about that and get Brett Cloutier up to speed on who he is. I know a hockey player that Brett Cloutier doesn't know. How about that, sports fans? Listen, I'll be back Sunday with our stream of consciousness. I'll be on later with the press conferences for the Hall of Fame inductions on Cloutier. I believe he did have big sideburns, Brett. I'll send you some information. Catch us later, 2:00, I believe. We'll be on the Hall of Fame press conference is on from 2 to 3:30 p.m. We'll be on Northeast Streaming Sports Live with that. I'll also share the broadcast on TGI Sports Talk, as long as Facebook hasn't blocked me again. And we'll be on Sunday with our stream of conscience. Lots to talk about, the Preakness, and we'll talk about the Kentucky Derby winner, Medina's what's her name? Medina's Pride, whatever it is. Bob Baffert. Bob Baffert's web of deceit that he's been preaching this week, and we'll see what happens if they win. She wins this race, or he wins this race. It'll be very interesting to see what happens going forward. But lots to talk about in the world of sports. Baseball, NBA playoffs coming up. NHL playoffs get started this weekend. I think this weekend. And we will talk all of it Sunday. See you then. Have a great weekend.